Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Sundance panel. My name's Freya Burkout. I'm a composer and creative technologist, and I'm so excited to be here today to speak with these creatives about their recent Sundance projects. So please join me in welcoming them to this virtual panel. Editor of the film If I Go, Will They Miss Me? And documentary The AI Doc, Daisha Broadway AC. Composer of the film La Cazadora, Tomás Barreiro. And editor of the film Buddy, Josh Ethier, ACE.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so to start us off, when each of you first came onto your respective projects, what was your first instinct about what the film needed? Let's start with Daisha.
I think for If I Go, Will They Miss Me? I had a good rough cut to watch because the director, Walter Thompson Hernandez, he had been cutting the film for a while, and it was really coming to me to try to figure out how to kind of make it a movie. I think he had a lot of vignettes, and it was beautiful and poetic and brilliantly shot, and it was good because I could see what he was trying to get at. I could see what he was trying to say with the film. And I think I initially approached it knowing that it needed like a stronger point of view. Like we really needed to start with the kid, and make it clear who we're following in the film and why and how things are affecting this young boy. I think that initially when I watched it, that was my first reaction. It was like, oh, this is gorgeous, but it really needs a kind of direction narratively in that way. So I kind of took it on with that in mind. And then for the AI doc, we came onto it, I think none of us as filmmakers knew how to tell this giant story that was constantly evolving in the news and in media, and the tech was evolving even as we were, like learning about it. I think when I came on, Sam Altman had just been ousted from OpenAI, and then a week or two later he was back, and then it was, so everything was constantly changing, like even as we began the project. But I knew that it needed to come from a place of, humanity. I think we needed to remind people how important it is to remain human and show humanity and creativity kind of go hand in hand. It was like only people can make this movie, and AI could not make a movie about an AI. So it's very
Please
like,
no.
Yeah, I know. It's important to remind people how important it is to be human and to create, and so I think in the same way that I was trying to find point of view with If I Go, it was important to find the point of view of the director in the film, because we follow him in the film, and as he's trying to discover how to make this world better for his son, even though his son will never know a world without AI. So it was kind of similar for both, in that I was trying to submit point of view in both films.
The gift of an editor.
Yeah.
Truly why we need you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Josh, how about you?
I was really lucky because Casper Kelly, the writer and director of Buddy, was drawing from a lot of sort of, a lot of his stuff like Too Many Cooks and certainly Buddy. It sort of draws on what we all remembered in the 90s being on TV, TGIF and, Saturday morning cartoons and everything. And thankfully I was like the perfect age to have been ingesting media at that time and been aware of it and had that been a part of my life through, elementary school, middle school, high school. So as soon as I read the script, I understood the references of what he was doing. And I've seen a lot of his work, and Casper is just this like fountain of incredibly weird, strange ideas. Like, what if we did this? Or what if we did that? And I saw, from having some friends that had worked with him, they were like, yeah, he's like, every single idea is new and wild. And like, it's going to be difficult to sort of rein all that in. So I sort of took a role of like, whenever he had some sort of idea that was super out of the box, of saying like, cool, how do we do it? Let me put my, problem solving at work and figure out how we can go for that. And through that, it was just like a beautiful collaboration. And so we just became this sort of like free flowing discussion about the different ways we could tackle the different scenes that are in the movie. Because the movie goes to a lot of places without spoiling anything. It covers a lot of stylistic ground and different approaches, and certainly different filmmaking styles even. So it was really just a chance to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall, and then it was my job to sort of weave that into one sort of cohesive experience, hopefully for an audience. And I was up to the task. I thought that was going to be a lot of fun. That was the thing that excited me the most about it. So we were basically just playing all day. It was amazing. It was a great experience. I really enjoyed working with everyone on that movie. You know, I got to work with a lot of great folks I've worked with before, like Zach Cooperstein, our DP. It was my first time working with our production designer, but like I feel like she should be given some award for covering. You know, she had to build a children's TV show set and then transition to an ultra real housewives home, but then take it to like, you know, a Night of the Hunter or Wizard of Oz. You know, we had all these incredibly big swings in the movie. So I'm glad that everybody else on the movie was really up for that challenge, and that made my job a little bit easier to, you know, again, weave that cohesiveness through it.
That sounds like a dreamy project.
It was amazing. I wish we could go back. You know, maybe there's a
Not
sequel
everything
there.
is
We'll
like
see.
that. Yeah. What about you, Tomas?
Well, I was invited to see the movie like a bunch of times before I was engaged. They want my opinion. We saw multiple cuts. Susan Andrews, she's like a favorite in Sundance. She went there with a short film, and then she went there to work on some scripts. She wanted that goal to get into Sundance 26. So we were seeing the movie, watching, discussing. It's a rough movie to watch. It is about this lady in Mexico which gets tired of the raping of woman in Juarez, and she decides to take justice on her own hand. It's pretty powerful from the get-go, but at the same time, it's a very tender story. It's super hectic because it happens in 36 hours. So they were like, from my opinion to my music, little by little. And then sound design, as you all know, they had other plans to tell, the story with different media like realism. And so we were going back and forth with natural sound, musical sound, how does the wind sound in Juarez, and building some emotion. So it was a beautiful process. It was long because, of course, she wanted to edit more and more and more, as Deisha and Josh should know. But in the end, we had a good bunch of time to get it together, and it was well received in Sundance. It was beautiful to see an American audience getting emotional about a Mexican problem, and the director, she's Mexican American. So for me, it was like really nice to see that we can actually be together, we can actually share emotions, we can actually be connected. So it was really beautiful.
I think that is like the goal of filmmaking, isn't it? It's like we're trying to have a human experience together, and it's a uniting thing, that's the ideal. My next question is also for you, Tomas, actually. Touching on the music and sound for a project, how do you build a cohesive sonic world that feels intentional from the first frame to the last?
Yeah, it's difficult because you get temptations of to go sequence to sequence and to make one sequence working well, but then how do you have a trace? How do you have an arc? So that was difficult, but we did a little manifesto of this is fear, this is trauma, this is rattlesnakes, this is memory. So we did a little map, and with that we could use and reuse and develop some sounds, and of course trying to find a positive voice in this intense, nasty, real story. So we had a really nice connection between mother and daughter in the film. So let's say the nicer music came there, and from there we could have some emotive arc and some fulfillment, some sense of everything's gonna be okay in the end.
Yes, which you really need after a story like that.
Yes.
Yep. Josh, Buddy leans into satire, surreal horror, and dark comedy within a children's TV program world. How did you approach cutting a narrative that frequently shifts tone between playful and sinister? They sound like they're at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly, and I'm sure Daisha can confirm this for us, but like those things, for a film editor, those things are so much closer than you think. You know, you're reaching to an extreme, and sort of all of the extremes are sort of at hand's reach once you get there. But I had done a film previously with the producers of Buddy. I had done their film from last year, Companion, which also very similarly plays with a lot of tone, is a romantic comedy, and suddenly is a sci-fi film, and suddenly is a horror film, and thriller aspects. So I think that's why they sent me this script, and they said, we'd love to have you on this, even though this is a much smaller movie. And I love small movies. I love taking big swings, so I was more than happy to oblige them. But I think honestly, it really just breaks down to what each scene needs in each specific run of, moments that you have. You have to think about, well, this thing is doing this thing, and this is important to Casper, the writer and the director is like, this is something he's trying to hit or something he's trying to underline. And so you just sort of attack each moment in a row. And that's why the review process and screenings and feedback from, other filmmakers, other directors, other editors, but also blind audiences are so important, because they help you to sort of tighten that as you go, or loosen something here, or go a little bit deeper on this thing, but maybe this thing isn't working as well as we'd hope. Maybe we'll skip that because we have 2 scares in a row, so we'll go for like one stronger scare. It's like trying to balance all that stuff and sort of modulate that as you go to create an experience that hopefully feels front to back satisfying for an audience, even if it goes, because I mean, Buddy specifically goes a lot of very uncomfortable and antagonistic places, and that's part of the storytelling, and it's part of what's there is exactly that, playing between, like, you have these children and you're on a children's TV show and everything's about cleaning and safely storing chemicals under the sink. And then all of a sudden the nurse is having her head smashed against a table with this scary music, and the clock on the wall is going, oh my God. And you're like, how are these things in the same shot even? So it was just about leaning into the ridiculousness of it, and leaning into, like I said, all those great ideas that Casper had and how far he wanted to push things. And then, showing it to an audience, getting that feedback, knowing what to listen to, knowing what was just a knee-jerk reaction, and then just, working with the producers and the director to make sure that we never got outside of too ridiculous, because we all agreed to make this movie, so let's not back off of it now. So let's go in for it.
And you need that external perspective too, because once you're deep in something, like, you lose it, you're sort of like,
I know, you fall in love with the movie that you're working on.
Right.
You want to make sure.
And you need fresh eyes, you need that audience to be like, oh, this thing isn't working. It's like, I would never have known that. I just know it really well now.
Yeah, every editor needs like 10 or 15 friends that they can trust to come in, who probably will not like the movie, but still have great feedback and great opinions on everything. Because you don't want to work in a vacuum for too long. You definitely want to do that for your first cut, but then you want to open it up and try to make yourself aware of the audience and see how you can do that.
Yeah, that collaborative way of working, it's the best. Daisha, both films of yours involve internal journeys, one through a child's vision and one through a filmmaker's exploration of a rapidly changing technological future. How did your editorial instincts shift between these very different narrative worlds?
Yeah, they were absolutely very different.
They sound polar opposite, honestly.
Yeah, kind of. In a way, they were the same, and when I'm tackling it from just a work storytelling point of view, they're similar in that, like you said, they're 2 characters to me going through this internal journey. And the worlds that they live in are completely different, completely opposite, and tonally the films are completely different, and that's the thing that I have to figure out. I have to switch my brain from cutting a narrative film that's tonally dramatic and poetic and childlike in a lot of ways, because it follows a child, and this child looks up to his father and sees him as a Greek god, and some of that manifests into the film through animation. And I think that switch in my brain has to happen because when you're cutting a documentary, as an editor, it's a completely different part of your brain. It's still, kind of three-act structure. We're still storytelling. We're still following a character, but you're really a writer when you're when you're editing a documentary. You're really
Absolutely.
just
Yes.
building from the ground up. Whereas on a film, like if I go, I'm trying to get to the filmmaker's North Star. I'm trying to make sure Walter's vision and what he wants out of this film, we get there, even if we get there in a different way than necessarily might have been intended, because things happen on set, things happen in the footage, and you find things in post all the time where you feel like you can create something better than what you got. But that, yeah, it's kind of like, it's just a weird switch that goes off where I'm like, okay, now I'm doing this, so I gotta make sure I do this right. And like I said, the AI doc was something that it was constantly evolving and changing, and so I cut maybe like 22 versions of the opening before, it's but it has like, and then in my brain it has nothing to do with like a narrative film, because I wouldn't do that many versions of a narrative film. But with a documentary, you really do have to be able to pivot and change and figure out just, okay, what's the best way to get this information across and to get the audience to be intrigued, engaged, and to feel. Because it's like, again, this is a film where it was about something so superficial and methodical, but we wanted it to feel as human as possible. So that was why it was tricky. And in a way, my narrative background helped with that, because I'm used to making the audience feel. I think that's a
Mm.
big part of me and Josh's job.
That makes sense. I mean, I
Yeah.
have such respect for especially documentary editors because, as you say, you're writing and you have so much footage to work through, but for that to also be in this changing landscape of the technology moving forward all the time, like it's just this shifting sands that you're trying to stand on, and you're like, 22 versions. I'm like, I get it. I understand how
Yeah,
that happened,
it
which
was
is
a
wild.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so much. Okay, this next question is for everyone. Was there a creative moment where collaboration across departments fundamentally shifted a scene? Let's start with Tomas.
Well, for me, all the time. Sometimes, you want to go back to cutting the film when you have the music, when you have the final music, and it's so difficult to get to do that. But also, sometimes you get the lucky moment where you can send music to the editors, for example, in advance, so you can really get a moment. With sound design, all the time we're really trying to find. And just as you guys said, sometimes, as Josh said, you're in the vacuum and you're really working on your own. And sometimes a little comment can really get you off of the box and make you see that you're working for the film, and that the films are amazing because they are choral. Editing goes to music, that goes to acting, that goes to architecture, and then you're suddenly in sound, in nature, in photography. So yeah, that's amazing, but it's rare. So you really need to be, I think, willing to let go of your ego and your ideas, and trust that the other is seeing something that you don't.
Yeah, I think so too. How about you, Josh?
I think it was just to piggyback off of what he said very quickly. I think one of the strongest things that you can do as an editor is push your director and push your producers to bring on a composer early. And that's exactly what we did on Buddy, because I knew that there was going
Amen.
to be, yeah, I knew that there was going to be absolutely no temp score possible for these children's television show sequences, because you can't find like the music of Barney. You can't find, the music of like Lamb Chop, aside from like the songs they sing. So we brought on a composer so early, and it was great to have that dialogue going while you're still shaping scenes, and then taking their stuff, stemming it out, cutting it the way that that it would have been cut at the time as a music editor. So anyways, just to say that for anybody listening, always get a composer on as soon as you can. Don't think, oh, the movie's locked, now we have to get a composer. Definitely bring them quickly, early. It helps everything be more cohesive. But to the question that was asked, I think there's actually one example I can think of that was really great, where our DP Zach and our director Casper had wanted to be very adherent to children's television show visual language, and so they shot the opening half hour of the film like very very traditionally in that way, and looked for moments where they could break out of it. And I remember specifically, without giving anything away, there's a moment where they break that visage and they put a shot in that wouldn't normally be in a children's television show. It's like a camera angle you wouldn't have seen, a camera setup that wouldn't normally have existed in that. And it was such a cool moment for them to break it. And it lived in that way for the edit for such a long time. But we noticed something incredibly strange, which was like, oh, we're going to this thing and it's new and I don't feel like it's quite right yet. It's not quite earned yet. Whereas like maybe at the script stage it did, maybe in production it did. But suddenly you're in editing and you're like, this suddenly jumps a little too early to this new thing. And so we were just looking through some footage and we found this great moment where, again, like the kids basically duck behind a table and they have a conversation that you wouldn't have covered normally in that type of visual language, the kids show. So, and then we had these other shots. So what I did was I cut the scene and I just stayed on a shot that looked at them go behind a table and just looking at a table for about 30 seconds while these kids are talking behind it. And it was such like a cool sort of like fourth wall moment where it took on this extra layer of like, oh, the kids themselves are subverting the language by doing this. And I remember thinking like, I wonder what Zach is going to think about this. And when he saw it, he was like, man, that works great. That really works great. Like, I'm so glad you did that. So sometimes that's why you want to bring a composer on early. You can plan for the absolute best. You can always plan ahead. You can always try to make sure that you have everything figured out ahead of time. But there's always the chance that there's something that somebody else is going to bring to it, and you want to try to explore that as much as you can. At least if you hire the right folks, like the three of us. So, but yeah, that's how it can sort of stretch beyond that sometimes.
It sounds really cool. How about you, Daisha? Did you have any scenes like that?
Yeah, we had two directors on the AI doc. One was Daniel Rohr, and then the other one was Charlie. And Charlie was an animation director, and he worked with a really cool stop motion company in Toronto. And because he was on from the very beginning, it was great to like get like sketches and drawings and like stuff that we were gonna slice in later. Um, because there was a lot of talking heads when I first started. That's all I kind of had was talking heads and experts and people
Classic.
just boring me to death. But it was cool because I when I interviewed for the job, I interviewed I already knew Daniel, but I met Charlie and we were talking about using animation and like the use of animation in films and in documentaries. And I said, well, I like them, but I always have to know why we're using them, like why we're doing it. Not just because it's cool, but are we explaining something that we can't explain with verite or like through these talking heads? And I said my favorite use of animation in a film recently was the Deathly Hallows, one of the Harry Potter movies. Because we had like this paper cutout stop motion when they were just explaining something that they could not shoot. Like the only way to explain this really is through animation, and they did it really cool. And so we got to a point where we're cutting, months later, and I thought about that conversation, and I threw that in. I threw in the whole animation from that Harry Potter sequence because it was a section of the film that we had nothing for, like, I was like, I know tonally what the animation should feel like here, and it should feel like that thing we talked about back when I met you. And I put in the music and I did the voiceover for it and like sent it off to them, and that became kind of the basis for the tone of that whole section of the film. And it was really great because anything I had an idea for, the animation team was like, oh yeah, like they were on very early, so they had kind of a blueprint outline of like what they were going to do based on the different sections of the film. But that could evolve based on conversations that we had throughout making the cut. And so it was really great to have them. All the producers were very involved in the edit of this film. Diane Becker, Dan Kwan, John, like everybody was very involved in how we were going to shape the story. So it wasn't just one person. So I had a lot of people I could talk to. There was a lot of people constantly watching the film. Um, like Dan Kwan says he like put the editors through the ringer, and he was not lying. Like very much, he was like, because it had to be great. Like everybody knew it had to be the AI film, and we couldn't miss stuff. So everybody's hands were in it. It's very collaborative, which I liked.
That sounds amazing. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that animation. I can't wait to see that. It sounds so
Oh,
cool.
it's great. I mean, the Harry Potter stuff is not in it. It was Tim.
No,
I
no,
want to
no.
be
But I
want to be
mean,
clear
just
about that.
conceptually, as you say, like the fact that it can do something that you can't do any other way, like that is the magic of
Yeah,
animation, you know?
yeah,
That's
totally.
really cool. That's awesome. Tomas, given the film's language and cultural specificity, were there specific musical traditions, instruments, or motifs you found essential to evoke the setting authentically?
Actually, no. Uh, it's fun because licensing did that. Like music supervising. So you would have songs, for example, only norteño songs for sure that are like the language in Juarez. But some songs they would feel this one is community, this one is danger, this one represents conflict, this one represents female sisterhood or friendship. So the music actually is very abstract, very sound designy, very textural, and we had trouble because we sometimes I would be like really tempted to do kind of a horror movie music, or sometimes kind of a much more drama music, and neither of those worked. So we really need to find a language to have those emotions, but with very organic sound. So I did lots of subwoofers, pitching winds, and sound designer. He was at first he was like, "Come on, that's my job," but
You're
but
stepping on my toes.
yeah, I was like, no, no, no. Let's find out what's different between music and sound is emotion. So how can we go from the realistic nature of sound to the emotive feeling of music and make it seamless? And I really love a movie when I have to be a Mexican composer, but I don't have to be Mexican. That's for me. That's a good film. I love when they tell me, "Oh, be Mexican, be more Mexican, be mariachi," and I love those. But we can be universal as well as anybody else, right? So
Absolutely.
you don't ask Alexander Desplat to be French.
No.
You don't. But you tend to ask me to be Mexican. So we need to work on that.
Yep, I
Yes.
think that is a really big
Amen.
problem with music, needing to sort of pigeonhole people. And if you're an underrepresented person, it's like, well, you do one thing, whereas other
Mhm.
people can do everything. And I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's, yeah, it's true. But,
Yeah.
like music is a universal language. We all can make those noises and do it respectfully too,
Yeah, nobody's asking me to make films whiter. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's completely unfair to ask anybody else to make it less or
That's
more
so weird.
their
They're
ethnicity.
asking me. They're asking me to make them whiter, so it's weird.
No.
Well, you have my
I'm
email,
kidding.
Daisha. I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I'm like, nobody wants that.
Everybody's asking me that.
Dear. Deja and Josh, what's your approach to restructuring when something really isn't landing emotionally? Deja, you can start.
I gotta, yeah, I think we talked about fresh eyes and having people watch things. I think it's so important because you do sometimes feel like, no, we got this. Like this, at least this scene is working, and then someone will watch and be like, actually, that scene is the problem. Um, and I think I usually just take a step back. I usually go for a walk. I try to imagine it a different way. I got the cards on the board like Josh does, and I kind of just move them around, go, what if we did this? I had some cards on this board over here for a film I did, Ricky, where I just put up a card that said, how are we introducing Ricky? And I just stared at it a lot and was like, what's the best way to introduce him? Because some of these scenes could start where they now end, and we could move this here. And I think that, you throw your ego completely out. You can't have that. You're in service of the film. And so as long as, I've worked with quite a few first-time directors now on independent films, and they get to a point where they're just like, I just want the movie to be the best it can be. And but it takes a while sometimes for them to get to that point because, they spend years with this thing. Especially if they wrote it, they've always had a vision of how it was
Mhm.
going to be. And then they get to a point where they went and they shot it and maybe they had limitations, which sometimes like make you more creative. And sometimes they just make you like curl up in a ball in the corner.
Yes.
I feel like they have to get past that. They have to get through that so that we could look at it and go, okay, what is our story structure? How do we best represent this character? How do we best represent this performance that this actress gave us? It's really great. Are we doing that the best way possible by this scene being here? Is this scene working the best in the place that it's in? And that takes a lot of, I've done this on TV shows. We have to rearrange a total act and go, maybe we end the act with this scene and maybe we go to commercial here. It's across all boards because everyone is just trying to make it as strong as possible. So I think that like as long as take out the kind of the ego of it and the dreams you had for it before, you can get to a better place with it. But it's mostly just about kind of unplugging from how long you've been working on it because you've seen it 1,000 different ways, and sometimes it's hard to figure out if 1,001 is the best way or was six the
Right.
best way. Like, do we have to go back to six? Like, and you have to, as an editor, Josh, you have six in a bin somewhere, and you go and watch it again. You go, well, six might have been the best, and you just might end up back, But it's really about that. It's about everyone watching it, everyone giving their opinions on it and weeding through kind of the stuff so
Mhm.
that you can get to the best version of it. It's hard though. It's very hard.
Yeah, it's a puzzle. I feel like film music is also a puzzle, but editing is like literally a puzzle, and I feel like that's just a thing that as a composer I'm like in awe of how you guys work because it feels
Yeah,
like
there's
moving
a
these
there's a puzzle
structural.
behind Josh right now. I can see
Yeah.
it.
Yes,
I've got
totally.
multiple puzzles in
Oh
here.
Oh
my
my
God.
god. Yes, wow.
The
That's
trauma
amazing.
is
How about
triggering.
you, Josh? I imagine you had lots of restructuring. It sounds like your project really like had space for that.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Daisha said, which is absolutely true. I kind of have like a rule where it's like when I'm working in during the day with the director and we're first exploring these ideas, like I'm in love with it. Like I absolutely have to be in love with it. I have to be 100% behind it and ready to fight anybody to make sure that that's what it is. But the next morning you have to go, well, forget all that. Now
Mm.
Yeah.
it's behind me, and next time I see it, like it better show up and do what it has to do, because if it doesn't, it's gone. You have to sort of like you have to just oscillate between being absolutely in love and like ready to strike something down.
Right.
It's a lot emotionally, but I feel like the best editors, certainly, I don't know if I include myself, but I feel like they try to have that balance, and it sounds like Dace struck that balance pretty beautifully. On our movie, there's actually a far more specific example of approach to restructuring something. We had Casper had wanted this very, and I won't spoil anything, but Casper had a very specific way that he wanted a certain character to exit the film. And what we found, unfortunately, was that when we watched it with audiences, it was leaving a lot of open-ended questions for them, the way that we had done it. And so we had to sort of rethink that, and we had to think about, well, how do we bear in mind what Casper wanted originally to get from that scene and from that moment, but also try to put something there for the audience so that they know that that loop is closed and that story is over and we're moving forward with our character, our main character. And so the simplest answer was like a very quick reshoot that they ended up doing. I believe they did the pickup shoot at a camera house in New York while they were doing ADR. 2 shots of an actress.
Wow.
Like I remember I zoomed in and I was like on FaceTime by monitor and they were like, "That's the editor," and they were like, "That guy looks like security. He's the editor." But just saying like, "Hey, try one like this, try one like that." Like, nope, I think you got it. That's great. And just trying to be like, I have experience on set because I've also produced, and just try to like be there and be like, "Nope, I think you got it, man. I think you totally got it. Let's let her go. You know, let her go do her ADR." But then we found out that, you know, after doing that, we would show audiences and they were like, "Oh yeah, no, like I understood, like, you know, that person isn't in it anymore. Great. Awesome." And it was just like trying to think about that in the simplest math possible, put on the producing hat to think about how much it's going to cost. How do we shoot it? Can we reuse a plate from production? Does this become a visual effects shot? Is that the cheaper way to do this? It's just about exactly what Daisha said, trying to listen to folks. And, you know, we spend our whole day in love with the thing, but then you want to put it out to an audience and say, you know, what's something I might have missed, or what's something that I'm so in love with I'm not noticing, you know, because at the end of the day too, editors are humans and we're totally prone to that. So it's just about pulling the ego out and saying, you know, what can I do to make this better, and what sort of ideas can I fire off, or listening to someone else with a really great idea and then totally stealing it and making it your own. So
best idea wins. I feel like that's such a good way to work.
Yeah, I say it every day when I'm working with directors. It's like, you know, I'll be wrong 1,000 times today, but if I'm right 6, those will be 6 really good moments, you know, and that's what it's about.
Yep. And you do get attached. Like, I mean, as composers, we get attached to pieces of music that we've written, but maybe they're not serving the story, and that's the kill your darlings. You know, it's hard. It's a hard process to go through. You have to let it go, and the story is queen. That's why we're all here.
Totally.
This is my final question. This is for everyone. When you first saw your film with the Sundance audience, what surprised you most about the reaction? Let's start with Tomas.
Oh my God, it was a roller coaster for us. It was so intense. For me, I mean, these are Juarez problems. These are real problems in Mexico. But I have to confess that I am really posh. I live in the city. I go to my music every day, and sometimes you can normalize these problems, like saying, "Well, this is the life of some folks." But for me, it was really intense to see. Oh my God, these are my problems and the world problems, and it make it more real for me. And also it was beautiful to see how engaged and really responsive and really respectful. I mean, the audience in Sundance is the best. They are really they know their stuff. They know how to watch a movie. So it was really fantastic to get all these comments and this engagement, and to feel this energy coming back. It was just breathtaking.
Sounds amazing. How about you, Daisha?
For If I Go, I was surprised at how much people were crying. Like someone was next to me, just full of snot crying, like just tissues,
Oh
and
my gosh.
I was like, you hope for that, you know? But one of the stars of the movie, Danielle Brooks, she had not seen it before, which I didn't know. And so watching it at Sundance was her first time watching it. And the scene where I was across the aisle from her, there's a scene in which she is in it and she's hugging her son. And I look over and she's just bawling. And
Oh,
she got up on the stage afterwards and was still crying. And it was an emotional event. And I knew why. It's anybody who has like issues with their father or issues with their partner, it's relatable. It's deeply, deeply relatable. And so I knew that it would be emotional, but I just the amount of sobs you could hear like in the theater. There's a library theater too. It wasn't it wasn't Eccles or something. So that's a little smaller. So you could just really feel it. And that was great. That was great to be a part of, and it felt like people had a moment to just get a good cry out, which I think is important sometimes. And then the AI doc, there's a lot of levity in it because we know how heavy the topic is. We want you to laugh so that you can cry later.
Yep.
and um, and so it was great to hear everyone getting the jokes because it's comedy is always the hardest thing to cut. I think it's like I don't know if you're gonna think this is as funny as I think it is, but people did, and that was great. And then there's a moment where and it's not a spoiler because the trailer's out, but there's a moment where Sam Altman sits into frame and people realize we interviewed Sam Altman and that nobody knew that yet. Like we got him and we got the guy from Google and there was like a collective gasp in the theater as soon as he sat down. It just like people just sucked in their breath because there's no indication in the film that he's coming or that
That's
we
a good
even
reveal.
it was a good reveal. There's no indication that we were going to be able to speak to these people. It was like felt like a low budget thing, and we are going to do this. And then he sits down, and everybody just, you could just hear it, and that was pretty awesome. I thought that was really cool. And I think that what we wanted people to get out of it, if they seemed to get out of it, and so that was just nice. It's nice to be a part of those two experiences where you put in a lot of hard work, and it seems like the point got across, which is good. Always good.
It's amazing. How affirming.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. How about you, Josh?
So our movie is, I mean, it's such a melange of different styles and different approaches and all this kind of stuff. And that's kind of what the selling point of the movie is how Casper, smashes all these things together, almost like, a kid with action figures living out their dream story. And so I knew that would be a wild ride for the audience. But the thing that I really enjoyed was just, I sat in the middle. We were also at the library theater. So I sat in the middle in the back and I could just sort of like lean over and be sort of in the middle of the two rows and just get a good look at everybody. Because we do have like a couple of like jumps in the movie, a couple of grabs that are unexpected. And it was just really fun to like lean into the audience and see like, boom, got like, 70 people in the middle of the row. And like, you hear a lot of like laughing afterward, as is traditional in a horror movie. There, everyone always gets gotten by something. And then there's like a laugh break and you sort of build in a little time for that in your head and you hope for it. And then, so being there and, we were the opening night. So you'd fly into town. We had our opening night party and, a lot of friends, a lot of great folks there, from festivals through the years. And so just, leaning out into the audience and seeing a jump really hit and that laugh start to pitter patter through the theater was, probably for me, like the biggest smile on my face when we played, just seeing like, okay, cool, great. I'm not crazy. Oh, this is awesome.
Yep. After being alone in the suite for so long,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, I wasn't on the wrong track.
Yeah. And we were editing remotely too. So my director was in Atlanta. So we would hop on like this and, we would crack jokes and talk about movies and books and music and the other things that were happening in our lives. But like the two of us getting to just like sit together and have that experience with the audience was, was really, really rewarding.
That's so cool. That sounds amazing. I mean, it is always like nerve-wracking, but it's the best thing when you're in the theater with everyone that first time, like that's what we all do this for. It's such a magical thing. Well, that looks like that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our panelists. We've got Daisha, Tomas, and Josh for being here to discuss their incredible work. Thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together. And thank you everyone for watching. It was so delightful to have you here. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.